Hey friends, this is Tiina and welcome to my new video. I'm super excited to show you my new theme for March since this became my all-time favorite and I had so much fun making it. I had a flower-filled theme for March 2021 and I've been wanting to recreate it some way ever since. I thought it would be fun to revisit that theme now 1 year later and also being able to see the progress I've made in a whole year. I also wanted to show you a couple of the first pages of that setup so you can see it too. Sometimes you don't even realize how much you've gone forward with your skills, so it's good to sometimes remind yourself of that. But yeah, let's start with my cover page. I started by painting the sky with this really light warm grey tone. I didn't want to choose a more vibrant color because I wanted the flowers to be the most eye-catching part of the painting, and I felt like if I had chosen a bright blue color, for example, it could take away from the flowers I painted later. I painted the upper part of the ground with a lighter green color and the bottom part with darker. When you do this, it's going to look much more realistic. I painted a pretty harsh line between the darker and lighter colors and didn't add a super smooth gradient. I feel like if you blend those colors very well, it's going to look more like you're looking at the scene from more higher up, but I wanted it to look like you were closer to the ground when looking at this flower field. By the way, like always, all my used products are listed in the description down below. I use gouache for this theme and I will try to list all the individual colors and everything that comes to mind, so definitely go check that out if you're curious about a specific product. For these bushes or trees in the background, I first just painted this green blob and then started stippling to make it look more dense. The little dots are almost like leaves or foliage of some kind. I added lighter green first and then just painted with different shades of green, trying to still stay within the more muted green tones instead of super vibrant ones. If you want to paint this as well, definitely try to add those leaves to the edges of the blob so they will look more organic and natural and not flat. I added darker colors to the bottom part of the bushes and left the edges and upper part lighter in color. There are definitely millions of techniques to create the look of foliage and leaves, but I've noticed the stippling technique somehow just comes the most naturally for me, even though it's definitely not the fastest way. When the bushes were done, I proceeded to paint the field itself. I started with the upper part and painted these thin strokes going across the harsh line I had created for the ground part of the painting. I started adding some random grass to the upper part of the field and used just a bit darker color than the actual background. I would recommend not going with a lot darker tones because it might look a bit weird in the end. I think I at some points also accidentally took too dark shades, but you can definitely cover some of those areas later with the flowers too. So yeah, I randomly just added these strokes everywhere on the lighter green part of the field and sometimes took lighter colors and darker ones too. But for the bottom part of the field, which was the darkest part of it, I took this light yellowish green and started making these imperfect little branches and grass. I didn't want to make it super dense and just fill it with these plants. I just focused more on making them look natural and organic by having them curve to different directions and painting these small little leaves randomly everywhere while still having some empty space throughout the field. This cover page painting is actually a lot smaller than what I usually do. I often make full page covers in my bullet journal, but this time I just wanted to try something new and I honestly love it. I don't know why I haven't tried this out before, but I definitely will make cover pages like this in the future too. After the grass and leaves were done, I started focusing on the white daisies I painted on top. I first just made some small dots in the back. Obviously these flowers are super far away, so making them by just adding small dots is better. They are in reality so small you only see the color, nothing else. You can also add them as much as you want. I went with a bit more spacious look, but you could also just add a lot more if you want your flower field to be more filled with flowers. I chose daisies because they're such an easy flower to paint and I feel like it's harder to mess them up. So obviously I painted some bigger daisies in the forefront of this image and I made them by first painting a circle and then starting to paint the petals. I painted some of the flowers facing straight to the camera, but most of them I painted in an angle with some droopy and asymmetrical petals. I would say it's better if you add more of those angled flowers, because when you are in a flower field, the flowers usually face all different directions and not straight at you. Whatever color you choose to paint your flowers with, I would highly suggest going with white color first and only then adding the other color on top. It's going to be a much more vibrant look. In my calendar spread, I actually didn't do this, and it was so hard to make my flowers fully opaque. The idea for this cover page actually came from an almost identical painting I just decided to one night paint in my sketchbook. I've been painting a lot more recently. I had this long period when I only painted in my bullet journal or painted for a YouTube video, and while that is also nice, the painting might lose its meaning and fun aspects a little bit when you're only doing it to create content or film videos. It has been nice to take a couple of steps back and finding the love for creating something beautiful and painting again when it's just for your own entertainment. I painted the middle part of the flowers with an orange color, and I just randomly added some orange dots to the field in the back because again, you would be probably able to see some of that orange color there. After I added the first layer of the white gouache for the daisies in the front, the petals were still a bit transparent, so I ended up going over them again to make it look more opaque. I took some brown color and painted the left side of each of those orange parts of the flowers to create some shadows. I wanted to choose pretty dark colors for that part because obviously the petals itself are just white, so that contrast makes it look much more interesting. Lastly, I also added even darker brown dots to the left side to accentuate the shadows. Throughout this theme, I used a lot of small brushes from Arteza, and I would say it would be good to own at least a couple of different shaped detail brushes or just small brushes you can, for example, paint the flowers and grass with. I mixed a light grey color and added some small shadows to the petals itself. There's some petals that are behind others, and I also painted those with the grey color to add some more details to the white flowers. This is such a small thing, but I think it definitely adds some more nice details to them and makes the painting look again more realistic. The last details I added to the painting was these darker grey little lines to the roots of the petals. Then I was finally able to peel off the tape and fully see the finished products, and I'm just so happy with it. I struggled with the lettering so much, I'm not even lying when I say I filled 2 spreads of my sketchbook when I tried to figure out what kind of lettering style I would want to use in March. I decided to go with this lowercase typewriter font where I first used the 005 Pigma Micron to draw the letters with a super messy style. I didn't fully color in the letters and instead left some little sections uncolored so it would look more random and it would have that messy style that I was going for. I also took my 03 fine liner and just went over some spots again to just have the whole header be a little bit darker in color. But that's it for my cover page for March, and now we will set up my calendar spread. After experimenting with my calendar layout last month, I stayed in my comfort zone this time and made a really minimalistic layout with sunflowers painted next to it. I've loved this look of painting the background first and then having some of the flowers and leaves kind of popping out of the frame, and I ended up going with that style for many of my spreads this month. So I started off by again painting the sky first. I think this time I added just a little bit too much of yellow to the paint and my sky turned out to be a little bit more yellowish gray, but I don't really mind that at all in the end. I had made this detailed sketch beforehand, so I decided to do things in a different order than I normally do, and after the sky I painted the leaves in the bottom of the painting and made the darker background later. I took a green color and started by just first painting the general shape for the leaves and left the flowers uncolored for now. I pretty much painted all the leaves first with the same color and only later added some highlights and shadows and added some more dimension. I peeled off the tapes and painted the leaves on the edges of the painting coming outside of the frame. I think this definitely made the painting look so much more interesting and worked perfectly with the more minimalistic layout. I know flowers for March might be a little bit weird theme idea, at least here in Finland. March isn't really that beautiful spring month when flowers bloom and sun shines all the time. I feel like we mostly have rain and slush on the roads, but maybe that's even better reason to paint flowers and forget all about that for a little while. This theme is like a perfect contrast to the rainy and snowy weather we have here now. After I have painted the leaves, I taped the edges of the painting again to add the darker background to the field. I made the bottom part really dark and gradually made it lighter going to the top. After the background behind the leaves was done, I mixed some white to the background color to paint some more leaves behind the greenery. Again, this part is simple but definitely makes this whole painting come together and makes it look like there's a lot of layers and leaves underneath. I also painted these random lines and stems to the background to again add some more depth. I spent quite a long time creating shadows and details for the leaves. I painted some parts for the leaves that were underneath other leaves with darker green and also made some veins to them. I actually forgot to record some of the painting process here when I added those details, but I just tried to keep the veins very thin, and I also didn't add them to all of my leaves so it wouldn't look so crowded. I definitely noticed when making this theme that my painting style is very messy. Often when I add shadows to an element, it looks pretty streaky, and blending is one thing I'm still often struggling with. I know I've come far, but there's definitely some things I'm waiting to get better in, and I can't wait to get there at some point. I know there is no such thing as perfection, of course, and I'm never trying to get there, but it's always so exciting to see how you're able to do something you couldn't do a year or a month ago. This was the painting where I didn't paint the flowers white first, and it was so hard to get the yellow color look good on top of the green paints. I went over them so many times. I painted the brown big middle part of the flower first and then made the petals. These flowers were so small and I struggled with getting the layers opaque so much that it was extra hard working on them, but at the same time, because they were so small, you can't really see any details anyway. I have to say, I don't really like to look at reference pictures that much when painting something like flowers. I love painting flowers, but trying to make them super realistic and lifelike is not my favorite thing, so throughout this theme I just painted all of my flowers and leaves from my imagination, and that's why some of my leaf shapes and petals might be a bit off. Doing art is all about having fun though, so I'm more than happy with doing so. I just mixed a tiny bit of black to the yellow colors and added that darker color to the root of the petals and any that were below others, but overall I didn't do that much. I think the flowers looked so good as is, and I just love the color scheme of this painting even though it's very summery. Here's a little close-up so you can see how I made the centers of the sunflowers. I started dotting this pale yellow color to the center of the flower, leaving this circular shape in the middle brown. Next, I worked on the header for this page. I again used the same font and wrote March in the upper right corner of the page. I think I made the header a little bit too thin, but I didn't feel like fixing it in the end. For some reason, I chose super time-consuming elements, and not only did the paintings take long to make, but I also feel like I spent hours on working on the headers alone, and my wrist always hurt after I wrote one thing. If you know me, you know I love craft paper, and I was so sad I couldn't use it in my last theme, so I was happy that this month it worked perfectly with my color scheme. I got this thin and long craft paper strip to my calendar, and I wrote the days of the week on top of that. I just drew these horizontal lines for my calendar and pretty much made it as minimalistic as possible. I wrote the dates with my Muji Gel Pen and added just a small section for my March focus in the right bottom corner. And that's it for my super simple calendar spread, and now we can go and set up my tracker spread. I actually used a very similar layout to track my habits and mood in November, and I remember liking it a lot, so I decided to use the same one here. I decided to do the layout itself first. I really don't know why I sometimes choose to do the layout first, even though I usually always begin with painting. But I got these small calendars from craft paper. I glued the rectangles on the page and drew small grids on top of them to use as habit trackers. I forgot to write the habit tracker headers at this point, but this month I'm tracking, for example, taking vitamins, walking, washing my hair, and watering my plants. I wrote trackers in the upper left corner with the typewriter style font. I think this font works so well with these paintings. For some reason I think I get this almost romantic vibe of the flower fields and this typewriter font together. I made this super simple line chart mood and sleep tracker again. I wrote the moods from bad to amazing and listed hours slept from 2 to 10 hours. I will mark both of my mood and hours slept with a little circle each day to the chart. Like I said in my previous plan with me video, the more effort it takes for me to track my mood, the less likely I'm to feel it, and this has worked for me perfectly so far. I wanted to paint this dreamy landscape with some daisies in the front and a green grassy hill in the back. I mean, at this point I didn't really know what I wanted to make. I seriously couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with this at first, so I kinda made it up as I went, but I'm happy I got there in the end. So I just painted this darker blob to the bottom of this painting and then painted this hill on the right side of the image. I painted the sky again with the light grey color and just went over everything twice to make the layers fully opaque. I always struggle with paintings that are shaped like this. When they are super long and thin, it's hard to come up with pretty landscape or scene that fits this awkward space. I also thought I would make another hill on the left side, but I covered it up later. The hills looked a little plain, so I took darker green and painted these blobs there to be a group of trees. Since I painted later some daisies on the front of this painting, I also took my small brush and stippled some teeny tiny white dots to the hills far away. I also painted some small grass there as well, and I was really careful not to make the strokes accidentally too thick. I think the fact that I recently have painted more for fun gave me a better attitude towards creating this setup and painting these pieces this month. I had so much fun and I let myself experiment more and came up with painting ideas on the go. I feel like my love towards this theme also comes from the fact that I am deep in my comfort zone now. I really had to go outside of my comfort zone while creating my theme last month. It's definitely good to try out new things sometimes and create things that are a bit different from your usual style, but I think in the future I might need to do most of that experimenting outside my bullet journal, because if one theme just isn't it, it often affects how and how much I use my own bullet journal. While I was talking, I added some lighter color to the left side of my trees in the background and finished the hills with the white flowers. This is always the part where I struggle the most, but I started adding the grass to the bushes in the front of my painting. I feel like I've made some progress in this technique as well over the years, but I've noticed when I paint grass like this, my grip still isn't very natural, and it's definitely one of the things that I need to work on. I'm also always kind of confused about the colors I should be using when painting something like this, and I often choose colors that look too light. I took my Winsor and Newton permanent white gouache again and started painting the daisies. I made them very similarly as in my cover page, so I cut some of the footage so you wouldn't have to see me do the same step over and over again. If you have any specific flowers you would like to see me paint in my weekly spreads, leave them down below. You always have the greatest ideas I didn't even think about beforehand, so I know you probably have some good recommendations for this too. I again painted the center of the daisies orange and then added those darker shadows on them. I just noticed that for the trees I made the shadows on the right side and for the flowers on the left side, so if you end up painting this picture yourself, keep that in mind so you won't make the same mistake I did. By the way, go and follow me on Instagram at Tiina's Diary if you haven't already and would like to see more painting content and close-up pictures of all of these spreads I'm creating here. I'm posting multiple times a week and also showing some of my personal life too, which isn't very visible here on my YouTube channel. I also have started this flower painting series where I will paint 4 mini flower paintings with one color in my watercolor sketchbook, so if you like my content here, you would certainly like that too. After the painting was fully done, I quickly just wrote the headers for my habit trackers as I forgot to do it earlier, and this is the spread all done. Next, I created my content planner. I ended up using the exact same layout as in my February theme where I painted the edges of the page and made this frame-like painting to the spread. I taped the edges of the painting and also taped the other side of the pages to avoid getting paint to the other pages, and luckily I did this because the paint from the sky had in fact smeared to the other side of the page, but only on top of the tape. For this spread I decided to paint something a bit different and chose poppies as my flower. I first just painted the sky and added more blue to the color this time to get this gold grayish blue sky that perfectly complemented the red poppies. I started painting the ground with this vibrant green paint. I was honestly just mixing the colors I had already sitting and drying in my palette, so I didn't really care about the colors too much. I remember when I was painting this, I had already painted the calendar and tracker spread that day, but I wasn't feeling like stopping yet, so it was like 6 p.m. and I decided to still paint the spread that day. And suddenly it was 10 p.m. and I had just finished the painting. But time flies when you're having fun, right? I wasn't completely happy with this field in the spread and I got a little bit annoyed by that while I was making it, but I always seem to forget that I often just cover my base layer somehow and don't even notice those mistakes and not so pretty spots, and that's what happened here too. But this flower painting process was super satisfying. I immediately noticed how much better it looked when I started going over the field with the white gouache, and that took my stress away from the field that didn't turn out so perfect. Obviously, I made the flowers a lot smaller in the back. I basically just made them into small dots, but this time I wanted to add a bit more of them. I think poppies are pretty weird shaped, so I definitely took advantage of that and just made these weird shaped blobs everywhere. I also added a couple of daisies to honor my cover page and kind of balance out the bright red I added later. I also removed the tape again later so I could paint the flowers overlapping the content planner spread itself. After all the white blobs had been painted, I took this warm red color I mixed with some red, yellow and white and started just covering all those flowers in the spread. It was so amazing to see them almost all coming to life with this color. After I colored all the flowers red, I mixed some black to the color. I used it to paint a little section on the bottom of the flower darker. It's almost like it separates one petal that is more in the shadow. There were so many flowers in this spread that I decided to make them super simplistic like this. I think it's more of an abstract style, I guess. I used this technique later too. I think it worked surprisingly well and looked pretty. I added some more daisies and bigger poppies to the bottom of this painting and again took my orange paint and colored the center of the daisies. I painted these super thin dark brown stems to the poppies and then started working on the content planner header. Like I said, I used the same exact layout I used last month for my content planner. This is one of the most important spreads for me in my setup since I just need this organization in my life. I know this isn't the most relatable spread to set up since many of you probably won't need this kind of spread, but you could make a similar layout for any of your needed projects or for work or school as well. I always need to make this big calendar where I can write my posts for each day and week of the month. I glued these graph paper strips for the headers of my boxes and calendar and drew the boxes with a Pigma Micron fine liner. The box below the calendar is for my weekly and general tasks, and the box on the left side is to track my Instagram posts. I used my rust-colored Archer and olive acrylic graph to draw these small circles to write the dates on top. Before we set up the last spreads in this setup, I'm quickly going to make my memory spread. As always, this layout is inspired by Monday Morning Design, whose Instagram I will link in the description of this video. This spread doesn't have any paintings or art. I'm just writing memories in the center and then making different colored and sized boxes across the spread. I love memory keeping, and this spread for me contains memories from the whole month. I always write or draw something to these boxes each day, and I love going back and seeing what I was up to that month. I used to have a similar page in my older setups when I first started bullet journaling, and I can remember some of the days by just looking at the things I drew, and I love that idea. I used different size Pigma Microns, an Arteza delivered acrylograph and craft paper. I also made this cute grid pattern to some of them with my Sakura Koi light cool cray marker, and also used a Mellow Days washi tape. That's always the quickest page to set up, so let's go to the next spread then. Since I had painted so much on my other spreads already, I just chose to make something super simple for this spread. On the left side there's my playlist page, and on the right side I wrote a quote. First I wrote playlist on the left page. I actually listened to a lot of music this month, so I was really excited to make this spread. By the way, I always include songs I've listened to during the previous month. If I included songs from the setup month, obviously I would need to leave this empty and add the songs later. I did something different for my playlist page this time, and I created this small craft paper envelope where I will add all the songs on a letter. When I glued the envelope together, I noticed it was hard to see the folds well, so I just took my white gel pen and made these little lines to the edges of the flaps. Then I glued the envelope into the spread and cut a piece of my Mellow Days notebook paper, so I would have this more yellow toned paper I can add the songs to. I rounded the corners and also made this super simple line frame to it. I printed these small album covers of the songs I listened to and stick them to the letter. I listened to a lot of metal this month for some reason. I've noticed it's easier for me to concentrate in writing my voiceovers when I listen to metal, and I was actually listening to some Metallica when I wrote this as well. I also recently found this amazing Norwegian brand called Kings of Convenience, and when I heard their Misread song, I instantly fell in love, and I already know it's gonna be my most played song on my 2022 Spotify Wrapped. But yeah, that was just a simple playlist page with a little twist, and I love how it turned out. Next, I made this quote page. I don't often add quotes, but I just wanted to add something to this page, so this was it. I found this quote that says, "There's a past version of you that is so proud of how far you have come," and it definitely resonated with me, especially when talking about how much I've done progress in the past few years. At some point it was hard for me to admit feeling proud about myself or something I had made, but it's not anymore. I'm so happy about where I am now and what I'm doing, being able to create some beautiful art and be happy with myself. I wrote the whole quote with the same typewriter font. It's definitely not perfect. Some of the letters are much smaller than others and are kind of crooked, but it's okay. My wrist already hurt so much that I definitely didn't want to try to make it perfect and make it even more painful. After I was done with the quote itself, I wanted to still paint these cute sunflowers in the page. I made them very small and tried to just work pretty fast. I took this yellowish green first and slowly added darker colors on top. I decided to cut most of that process since my video already was long enough. Then I painted the petals and the flowers itself. I used a really similar technique as in my calendar spread, but left it even more simple. Again, I painted the center of the flower using the pale yellow color and stippled these dots again, leaving the center just brown. Lastly, for this page, I made this double-lined frame outside the quote. And finally, we are getting to the last spread of this long video. Again, I'm using a layout from Lumen Dots, a talented artist who, by the way, just uploaded her first ever YouTube video. I will link her socials down below, so definitely go check it out. The painting I'm doing here is actually inspired by another artist called Kwan's Art. She is painting stunning flower and landscape paintings, and I've seen this kind of window frame flower painting in her feed, so I wanted to try it out myself. So this painting has a window frame and there's a tulip field outside. I started by painting this really simple gray window frame first and then started working on the outside scene later. I actually ended up painting on top of the inside frame, so I repainted it later. It was hard to avoid painting on it when working on the flower field below. I also put some tape over the outside frames when I painted the landscape so I wouldn't accidentally paint over it. I painted the sky with a light bluish grey color and made the field itself very messy. I feel like at this point I wanted to just get it done, and with the experience I gained from the other paintings, I knew already that most of this field was going to be painted over anyway, so I definitely didn't want to spend the whole afternoon trying to perfect it. Once the field was done, I took my white gouache again and started painting the flowers. I mostly painted the tulips closed just to keep the shape as simple as possible, but I made some more open ones there as well. I again took off the tape so I could paint the flowers on top of the frames too. I took this soft pink color and painted all of the flowers with it. I also took some green paint and painted some leaves and stems going on top of the window frame. Then I mixed this darker color and started adding the darker details in a similar way as in my content planner painting. I didn't really even think where I was adding it. I mostly added it to the bottom of the petals, but for some of them I also made these small shadows to the top too. I'm honestly surprised everything turned out so well, even though I didn't really plan anything that well. By the way, I'm so sorry I had to speed up some parts way more than I would have liked. I just had a record amount of footage and I didn't really know what else to do. I really hope you still enjoyed watching this video and found it helpful and relaxing too. Like I've said many times, I had so much fun with this theme and I really enjoyed making it, and I have a feeling that I will enjoy filling the pages up as well. I took some lighter pink and also added some random highlights to the lighter spots of the flowers, and then I just started working on the stems and leaves by taking a lighter green color. After the flower field was done, I took my grey color again and now taped the edges so I could paint the inside frame for the window. I thought it would be better to tape it so the lines would be sharper and easier to make as well. Then I finally started working on my weekly spread layout itself, and I got these graph paper rectangles and glued them to every other daily box. Then I outlined the other boxes with a 03 Pigma Micron and drew this little line to separate my daily journaling space from my tasks. I wrote the days of the week on the boxes with the typewriter font, and that's it for the whole lengthy March setup. Now we are getting to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did enjoy setting up this theme and painting. I'm just quickly going to flip through all the spreads I made in this video. If you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Leave a thumbs up and leave a flower emoji down in the comments so I know you watched until the end. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!